Metabolism expert Dr. Ben Bickman has explained that fat cells in our bodies don't expand merely because we consume too many calories. Instead, they grow when insulin levels increase. He illustrates this point vividly from his lab. I grow fat cells in petri dishes in my lab. Right now, back at BYU, I have students cultivating fat cells in the incubator. They are suspended in a culture medium overflowing with calories. Every calorie a fat cell could possibly desire is present, yet they remain tiny, ungrowing cells. That is, until we introduce one crucial element. The moment we add insulin to that culture, the fat cells begin to enlarge. If we examine them 6 hours later, a substantial lipid droplet is visible. 6 hours after that, it's even larger. Clinical evidence further substantiates how insulin impacts fat cells and drives weight gain, thereby proving that the fundamental cause of obesity is hormonal, not solely behavioral. Consequently, if your goal is weight loss, simply counting calories or enduring grueling workouts might not be the most effective approach. What truly matters is adopting metabolic strategies that help reduce your insulin levels. That is where genuine progress commences. In fact, human physiology offers the most compelling evidence that fat accumulation cannot occur unless insulin is elevated. A poignant example is a common eating disorder among young people with type 1 diabetes called diabulimia. This tragic scenario involves individuals feeling immense pressure to be lean, having discovered that their insulin syringe is the absolute gatekeeper of the fat cell. Therefore, they deliberately underdose their insulin to maintain their desired thinness. They can consume as much as they wish, and as long as they administer a deliberately lower dose of insulin, not even zero, they will remain as slender as they desire. Of course, there's a severe metabolic price to pay. They experience hypoglycemia and develop ketoacidosis, eventually succumbing to these complications, but they achieve their desired thinness. Thus, despite those who insist it's just calories, we have a human case study that definitively refutes that notion. Many experts consider fasting to be one of the most potent metabolic tools. However, Dr. Ben Bickman emphasizes that fasting is highly individualized and not always practical. It also demands preparation and a fair degree of discipline. As an alternative, he proposes a much simpler method he calls the insulin trick. The concept is to strategically outsmart your body through specific eating habits that aid in controlling insulin levels. For instance, most people are unaware that upon waking, your insulin levels are already elevated, a phenomenon known as the dawn effect. As we approach waking in the morning, cortisol levels naturally rise. This serves a very beneficial function. It's supposed to happen and is natural in everyone who sleeps. So, a few hours before we typically wake up, around 4 a.m. or so, cortisol levels begin to climb significantly. This is thought to be a result of the body starting to wake up, the brain and nervous system coming back online, and the body's metabolic demands beginning to increase. If cortisol goes up, it promotes the liver to start breaking down all of its stored glycogen and releasing that as glucose into the bloodstream. Consequently, we commonly experience an elevation in glucose as we wake up. That's why, in the morning, some people may find they are a little more insulin resistant. This is a very common feature, and why I am inclined to state that morning is a time of insulin resistance. This is a surprising revelation. Even individuals who practice intermittent fasting by skipping dinner often see minimal to no effect. This is because the period immediately following waking up is actually the most perilous for fat gain. Any food consumed within the first 2 hours after waking is more prone to being stored as fat rather than utilized for energy. Why? Because your body is undergoing a hormonal surge, particularly of cortisol and insulin. To circumvent this, you need to simply wait it out. Don't rush directly to the kitchen the moment you leave your bed. Your body naturally provides a burst of fast-burning energy first thing in the morning. Leverage it. Dedicate 20 to 30 minutes to planning your day, taking a brief walk, or engaging in some light work. Your brain and body are operating at their peak during this window, so seize that advantage. Then, when it's finally time to eat, take your time. Avoid a sugary, carbohydrate-heavy breakfast. Instead, transform it into a mindful ritual. Allow the aromas, the sounds, and the entire process of preparing your meal to gently ease your body into digestion. This approach helps recalibrate your metabolism and sets the foundation for a healthier day. I would say the simplest strategy would just be to change breakfast tomorrow overnight. Fasting is incredibly therapeutic. Insulin will decrease during a fasted state, and that sort of resensitizes the body to insulin. So in the morning, you've finally been fasting overnight, insulin has come down. The last thing you want to do is spike your insulin with a starchy, sugary breakfast. And of course, tragically, breakfast nowadays is almost just a dessert all over the world. It's pure sugar and starch. I would say change breakfast tomorrow. Dr. Bickman also emphasizes that cortisol levels are intimately connected to your circadian rhythm and stress. Simply put, if you don't achieve adequate sleep, your body interprets it as a form of stress. As a result, your morning cortisol levels can be 2 or even 3 times higher than normal. This spike, in turn, elevates insulin levels. When this occurs, adhering to your usual routine becomes significantly more challenging. You'll experience increased hunger, a reduced sense of control, and a greater propensity to crave sugary foods. Cortisol's metabolic effects do impact the brain, and there it influences appetite and food cravings. And wouldn't you know it, it particularly increases cravings for carbohydrates. Cortisol traverses the blood-brain barrier and once again binds to glucocorticoid receptors in the hypothalamus and the amygdala. These are both regions involved in hunger and reward. So, people feel good about what they're doing. In the hypothalamus, cortisol upregulates a protein called NPY, neuropeptide Y, and another called a Gaudy-related protein, AGRP, and these are increased in response to the glucocorticoid response elements. When they're activated, they stimulate appetite. Simultaneously, cortisol inhibits leptin signaling, potentially reducing satiety. But separate from that regulation of appetite in the amygdala, cortisol enhances dopamine release, thus increasing cravings for very palatable, energy-dense foods. It's also crucial to eliminate anything from your breakfast that could spike your insulin levels. This includes more than just carbohydrates. Even coffee can pose a problem. Dr. Ben Bickman explains that caffeine can elevate insulin, particularly when combined with carbohydrates. In the morning, your cortisol is already high, which propels more glucose into your bloodstream. Therefore, if you consume coffee first thing, it can trigger a sharp insulin response, even if you haven't eaten anything yet. Now, I want to highlight this particular study here. It was published about 20 years ago. What they did was document the degree to which caffeine increases insulin secretion when someone consumes glucose or carbohydrates. When we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar levels will climb, and insulin will need to rise to reduce that blood sugar or bring it back down. When you couple that carbohydrate load with a high amount of caffeine, you have to have much more insulin. Insulin has to work much harder to clear the glucose. That's why it's advisable to postpone your morning coffee. It helps maintain hormonal balance and prevents early damage to your metabolism. At its core, Dr. Ben Bickman's insulin trick is about precisely understanding how your hormones are behaving. And the optimal time to capitalize on that understanding is in the morning. It's the one part of the day when you can reliably predict your insulin's activity. Later in the day, that clarity diminishes. Thus, getting your morning right is paramount because it establishes the trajectory for everything that follows. The intricate balance between cortisol and insulin shapes your appetite and dictates whether you're more prone to overeating. A well-timed, balanced breakfast initiates fat burning and signals your body to utilize energy rather than store it. Of course, this isn't an overnight miracle. Dr. Bickman's trick isn't intended to be dramatic. It's a starting point, but a powerful one. It places your body in a state where weight loss becomes easier and more sustainable without demanding extreme effort.